Rain pounds against the windows of a terraced house on Green Street. The wind whistles through the cracks of the poorly sealed windows. Inside, a family sleeps restlessly. It is 3:47 a.m. when it all begins. A sharp knock echoes from the floor above. Then another one. And one more. Peggy Hodgson wakes with a start. For a few seconds she lies motionless in bed, eyes open in the darkness, listening. Her heart pounds. She knows every sound in her house, every creak of the wooden floorboards, every groan of the old pipes. But this is different. The blows continue. Rhythmic. Deliberate. As if someone were hitting the ground with their knuckles, over and over again. She gets up and goes upstairs. Her bare feet touch the cold linoleum. In the room her daughters Janet and Margaret share, she finds the girls awake, huddled together in bed, the sheets pulled up to their chins. "Do you hear it, Mom?" Margaret whispers, her voice trembling. Peggy hears it. Everyone hears it. The knocks come from the walls. From under the beds. From the wardrobe. From everywhere and nowhere. This is the first night. It won't be the last one. Enfield is a suburb north of London, a place of identical terraced houses, small gardens, and ordinary lives. People work in factories, offices, and shops. They return home by bus, cook dinner, and watch television. Nothing extraordinary happens here. Or so they thought. The Hodgson's house is number 284 Green Street. A two-story red brick building, identical to all the others on the street. From the outside, nothing distinguishes it. But in the summer of 1977, those walls began to hold secrets that would defy all logic. Peggy Hodgson is a woman in her 40s, a single mother of 4. Her husband abandoned them a little over a year ago. Now she raises 13-year-old Margaret, 11-year-old Janet, 10-year-old Johnny, and 7-year-old Billy on her own. She is a practical woman, with no superstitious tendencies. She doesn't believe in ghosts or fairy tales. She believes in bills to pay and mouths to feed. But what he is about to experience will test everything he thinks he knows about reality. The night is hot and humid. Margaret and Janet share the front room on the second floor. The beds are side by side, separated only by a bedside table. The girls can't sleep. The heat is stifling. "Did you hear that?" Janet suddenly asks. Margaret sits up. There's a strange sound, like a dragging, as if something heavy were moving across the floor. And then Janet's bed begins to shake. At first it's subtle, barely perceptible. Then it becomes more violent. The bed shakes from side to side, as if someone were pushing it hard. Janet screams and jumps out, running to her sister's bed. The two girls watch, horrified, as Janet's bed slowly moves across the wooden floor, away from the wall, moving on its own. Peggy rushes into the room, alerted by the screams. She sees the bed in the middle of the room, several centimeters away from where it should be. "You moved it," he says, though his voice lacks conviction. "We didn't do it, Mom. It moved on its own." Janet cries. Peggy pushes the bed back into place against the wall. It's heavy. It takes effort. The girls couldn't have moved it so easily. The three of them stay in the room, silent, waiting. The minutes pass. Nothing happens. Peggy is about to say something reassuring when they hear the banging. Bang! 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 For loud knocks, as if someone were hitting the wall with a hammer. They came from the dividing wall between the girls' room and the neighboring house. Peggy runs downstairs and out into the street in her nightgown. She knocks on the door of her neighbors, the Nottinghams, an elderly couple. They are bewildered, in their pajamas, clearly awake from sleep. "Are they banging on our wall?" asks Peggy, aware of how absurd it sounds. The Nottinghams shake their heads. They heard the knocking too, they say, but thought it was coming from the Hodgson's house. Peggy goes back inside. The knocking continues, now louder, more insistent. It comes from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The whole house seems to vibrate with it. In the kitchen, the drawers begin to open and close on their own. The cabinet doors wobble on their hinges. The silverware clinks in its compartments. Johnny and Billy wake up and run downstairs. The four children crowd around their mother in the hallway, while the banging echoes around them, a relentless staccato with no visible source. Peggy picks up the phone. Her hands tremble. She dials the police. Constable Carolyn Heaps arrives around 1 a.m. She's a young woman, in an immaculate uniform, with a notebook in her hand. She's responded to calls about domestic disturbances, robberies, and drunken brawls. Nothing in her training has prepared her for this. Peggy greets her at the door, grateful to see an authority figure. She takes her inside and begins to explain, stumbling over her words, aware of how unbelievable it all sounds. Constable Heaps listens politely. She checks the rooms. She finds nothing out of place. She is about to leave, to write the incident as an unfounded call, when it happens. A loud bang echoes in the living room. The constable turns abruptly. A chair, a heavy wooden dining room chair, moves. It slides across the floor, away from the table, moving about 30 centimeters toward the center of the room. Constable Heaps stares intently. There are no wires, no visible tricks. The chair simply moved. He takes out his notebook and writes with a slightly trembling hand, "I personally witnessed a chair move inexplicably, approximately 1.5 feet across the linoleum floor. I could find no rational explanation for this movement. This is the first time someone outside the family has witnessed what is happening at 284 Green Street. It won't be the last one. The phenomena are intensifying. The banging now happens at all hours, day and night. Margaret and Janet report that their beds shake violently while they try to sleep. Small objects fly through the air, the children's building blocks, books, shoes, toys. They appear in impossible places, as if someone invisible had deliberately placed them there. One day, Peggy walks into the kitchen and finds all the cereal boxes from the cupboard stacked in a perfect tower in the middle of the floor. No one in the house admits to doing it. Lego marks appear on the walls, embedded in the plaster at such a height that the children could not have thrown them with that much force. Neighbors begin to talk. Some offer help. Others cross the street to avoid passing in front of the house. Peggy is desperate. She has contacted the vicar of the local church, who visits the house and performs a blessing. The phenomena continue unabated. Someone suggests contacting the Society for Psychic Research. Graham Maurice, a photographer for the Daily Mirror, receives a call about a haunted house in Enfield. He would normally dismiss this as just another unfounded sensationalist story. But something in Peggy Hodgson's urgent voice makes him hesitate. Decide to investigate. He is accompanied by George Fallows, an experienced reporter with a healthy skepticism about the paranormal. When they arrive at 284 Green Street, they find a house in chaos. The children are clearly terrified. Peggy looks exhausted, with deep dark circles under her eyes, on the verge of a nervous breakdown. While the journalists are talking to the family in the living room, the blows begin. Bang! 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 Maurice records the sound. It is loud, unmistakable, seemingly coming from within the walls themselves. "Can I search the house?" Maurice asks. Peggy nods, resigned. Maurice inspects every room. He checks the pipes, the floorboards, looks for any mechanical source of the noises. He finds nothing. While he's in the girls' room, a building block flies off the shelf and hits the opposite wall with considerable force. Maurice turns around, but doesn't see anyone near the shelf. Get your camera ready. If something is going to happen, he wants to capture it. Maurice spends several nights at the house. He takes hundreds of photographs. Most show nothing unusual. But some. In one image, Janet appears to be levitating. Her body is horizontal in the air, several feet above her bed, in a position that seems impossible to fake without harnesses or wires. Her face shows an expression of surprise or fear. Her hands are clenched, as if clutching something invisible. Maurice swears it's not retouched. He took it with a fast exposure camera that captures almost instantaneous movement. There was no time to prepare tricks or special effects. I was there, he would later say. I saw the girl being thrown from the bed. I took the picture purely on instinct. When it was developed, I couldn't believe what I saw. More journalists arrive. The house at 284 Green Street becomes a media sensation. But Peggy doesn't want the attention. She just wants it all to be over. Maurice Grosse receives the call about the Enfield case. He's a man in his 50s, burly, with thick glasses and a serious demeanor. He's an inventor by trade, but for some years now he's become deeply interested in the paranormal. His interest isn't academic or casual. It's personal. 2 years ago, his daughter Janet died in a motorcycle accident. She was only 22. Since then, Maurice has experienced what he interprets as signs from his daughter, objects moving, lights flickering, voices and radio static. He searches for proof that consciousness survives death. The Enfield case could be that proof. Grosse visits the house on September 5, 1977. He is greeted by Peggy, cautious but hopeful. She tells him everything: the knocks, the flying objects, the moving beds, the appearances of shadowy figures in the hallways. Grosse listens without judgment. He takes out recording equipment, cameras, thermometers, instruments to measure electromagnetic fields. He sets up camp in the house, prepared to stay as long as necessary. We're going to get to the bottom of this, he tells Peggy. That first night, as Grosse sets up his equipment in the living room, the banging begins. It's louder than he expected, so violent it makes the furniture shake. Grosse records everything. He takes meticulous notes. Time, location, intensity, duration. He is methodical, almost obsessive in his documentation. And then he hears something that chills his blood. A voice. Hoarse. Rough. Masculine. It's coming from the upstairs room where the girls are lying down. Grosse runs up the stairs. Janet is in her bed, but something is terribly wrong. Her body is rigid, her face contorted in an expression that isn't hers. And from her throat comes a voice that definitely isn't hers. It is deep, guttural, the voice of an old man. Get out of my house. The words echo in the small room. Grosse approaches, holding the recorder high. Who are you? He asks, keeping his voice firm. Janet's voice laughs, a dry and unpleasant sound. I lived here. This is my house. Get out. Margaret is in the next bed, covering her ears, sobbing. Peggy runs in, but Grosse raises a hand, asking her to wait. What's your name? He insists. There is a moment of silence. Then the voice replies. Bill. Bill, what else? Bill Wilkins. I died here. I died in this house. Sitting in the chair downstairs. Cerebral hemorrhage. I went blind, man. Blind and then dead. The voice continues, spitting out words in confused, disjointed bursts. It speaks of the house as it knew it decades ago. It mentions details that an 11-year-old girl shouldn't know. Grosse records every word. After several minutes, Janet collapses, exhausted. Her voice fades. The girl is pale, sweating, trembling. She says she remembers nothing, that it's like falling into a black void and waking up tired and scared. Grosse investigates. He asks elderly neighbors about the history of the house. A woman, who has lived on the street for 50 years, remembers a man named Bill Wilkins. He lived at number 284 decades ago. He died there, she says, in the living room. A stroke, she thinks. He was a lonely man, with no close family. The description matches what the voice said. How could Janet know this? Grosse has no answers. Only more questions. The entity calling itself Bill Wilkins becomes a constant presence. The voice speaks through Janet regularly, sometimes for hours. Grosse records everything. Hundreds of hours of audio tapes. The voice is consistent in its story but erratic in its behavior. Sometimes it's hostile, shouting obscenities, ordering the family to leave. Other times it sounds confused, lost, asking where it is or when it is. "I don't want to die," the voice says at one point, with a note of genuine despair. "I don't understand what happened. I was here and then I wasn't. Why can't I leave?" Other phenomena continue. Heavy objects move, wardrobes shift, a heavy chest of drawers tips over on its own. Curtains spontaneously ignite, extinguishing themselves before causing a serious fire but leaving inexplicable burn marks. Janet levitates repeatedly. Not only while she sleeps, but also while awake, conscious, and terrified. She is thrown from her bed with such force that she hits walls and doors. The bruises on her body are physical evidence of invisible violence. On one occasion, Grosse and Peggy found her trapped under a heavy radiator grill that had somehow ended up on top of her while she slept. It took 2 adults to lift her out. "How did this get here?" Peggy asks, not waiting for an answer. There is no answer that makes sense. Guy Lyon Playfair joins the investigation. He is a writer and paranormal researcher, a colleague of Grosse in the Society for Psychical Research. He has studied poltergeist cases in Brazil and is intrigued by the reports coming from Enfield. When he arrives home, he immediately witnesses activity. A cushion flies across the room, hitting him in the chest. There's no one around. "Interesting," he murmurs, and takes out his notebook. Playfair and Grosse establish nightly vigils. They take turns, one sleeping while the other observes, records, and documents. They are there when the voices begin, when objects fly, when Janet levitates. Playfair is more skeptical than Grosse, more willing to consider prosaic explanations. But even he cannot explain what he sees. One night, while keeping watch alone in the girl's room, he witnesses Janet being violently thrown from her bed. There's no way she could have thrown herself with such force. Physics simply doesn't work that way. He records it in his diary, clearly lifted and thrown. Not by its own means. The voice sessions become more disturbing. Bill speaks of dark things. He mentions other spirits in the house, entities that never had human life, things that lurk in the shadows. "I'm not alone here," the voice says through Janet. "There are others. Things worse than me. They want her." "Who?" Grosse asks. "They want to use the girl. Just like they're using me." The temperature in the room drops sharply. Everyone can see their breath condensing in the air. It's summer outside, hot and humid, but inside this room it's freezing cold. Margaret starts screaming. She points to the corner of the room. Everyone is watching. There's something there. Not a solid figure, but rather an absence of light, a darkness denser than the surrounding darkness. It has a vaguely humanoid shape, but twisted, wrong. It moves. Grosse raises his camera, but before he can take a picture, all the lights in the house go out. A complete blackout. Even the streetlights outside have gone out. In total darkness, they hear breathing. It's not the breathing of anyone present. It's heavy, labored, and wet. And it's right behind them. Nobody dares to move. The seconds stretch out, they turn into minutes. Then, as suddenly as they disappeared, the lights returned. The darkness in the corner has disappeared. Janet is unconscious in her bed, pale as a sheet. The house has changed. Not physically, though there are new marks on the walls, deep scratches that look like they were made by claws, dark stains on the ceiling that no one can explain. The change is deeper, more visceral. There's a heaviness in the air, an oppression you feel in your chest upon entering. Visitors report feeling nauseous, having headaches, an inexplicable urge to leave. The family lives in a constant state of siege. Peggy has lost weight. Her hands tremble when she holds her teacup. The younger boys, Johnny and Billy, refuse to sleep alone. Margaret has developed severe insomnia. And Janet. Janet is deteriorating. The girl who was vibrant and lively just 3 months ago is now pale, with deep dark circles under her eyes. She has lost weight. Her voice, when not possessed by the entity, is barely a whisper. There are times when she stares into space with glassy eyes, as if she were seeing something no one else can see. They're consuming me, he tells Grosse in a moment of lucidity. I feel like they're emptying me out from the inside, as if they're replacing me with something else. The protests are becoming more violent. It's no longer just objects flying around or beds shaking. Now there are direct attacks. Janet is dragged by her hair, invisible hands pulling her as she screams. Red marks appear on her skin, scratches that spring up spontaneously, as if invisible fingers were gripping her tightly. One night, Grosse and Playfair find her levitating near the ceiling, but this time she is conscious, terrified, crying and pleading for help as her body is manipulated like a puppet by forces she cannot see. Make him stop. Please, make him stop, he shouts. The researchers can do nothing more than observe, document, and try to console her with words that sound hollow even to their own ears. When they finally lower her, they find finger marks around her neck. Dark bruises in the shape of hands. Large, adult hands, impossibly large. Playfair is interviewing Peggy when noises start coming from the kitchen. Cabinet doors slamming open and closed. Dishes sliding off shelves. The faucet turning on by itself, with water gushing out at full pressure. And then the knives. One by one, the knives from the block on the counter begin to emerge, rising into the air, slowly rotating as if an invisible hand were examining them. Playfair watches, fascinated and terrified at the same time. The knives are lined up in the air, pointing directly at him. There is a moment of absolute stillness. Then they launch. Playfair throws himself to the ground. The knives stick into the wall behind where he stood moments before, embedded deep in the plaster, vibrating with the impact. Peggy is paralyzed, with her hands over her mouth. They want us to leave, she whispers. They're warning us. But leaving isn't an option. They have nowhere else to go. This is their house, their home. They've lived here for years. They can't just abandon it. Although something very clear is trying to expel them. Grosse has installed voice-activated recorders throughout the house. They capture hours of audio even when no one is physically present in the rooms. Upon reviewing the tapes, he discovers something disturbing. There are voices in the recordings. Multiple voices. Not just the deep voice of Bill Wilkins, but others. Voices of women, of children, of something that doesn't sound human at all, clicks, grunts, sounds that seem like language but are in no recognizable language. In one particularly disturbing recording, taken at 3:33 a.m. when the whole family was asleep, a crystal-clear voice says, "She is ours now." Grosse plays the tape over and over. There's no doubt. The words are unmistakable. When it is played for Peggy, she cries. What are they talking about? Who is she? Janet? Nobody has the answers. The voice claiming to be Bill Wilkins becomes more communicative, but also more erratic. Some nights he talks for hours, telling stories of his life. He says he worked in construction, that he never married, that he died alone and confused in the living room chair in 1963, watching the clock strike 11:15 when something exploded in his head and everything went dark. I didn't know I was dead, the voice says with genuine sadness. For a long time, I thought everyone was ignoring me. I would speak, and no one would answer. I would touch things, and my hand would pass right through them. I didn't understand. Grosse asks how he can speak now, how he can move objects. The voice laughs bitterly. It's not me. They're using me. The dark things. They caught me when I was lost. They told me I could come back, that I could touch things again, that I could be heard. But they lied to me. Now I'm trapped, and they're using me to do things, bad things. What things? Playfair asks. To frighten. To hurt. To open doors that shouldn't be opened. What doors? There is a long pause. When the voice speaks again, it sounds different. Deeper. Older. Doors between worlds. This girl is a door. And we are opening it. The phenomena are accelerating in frequency and intensity. Upper hallway, Margaret is walking toward her room when a figure materializes in front of her. It's the silhouette of a tall man, but transparent, barely visible. She can see right through him to the far wall. The figure stares directly at her, extending a hand toward her. Margaret screams and runs downstairs. When others go upstairs to investigate, there's no one there, but the air is so cold they can feel their breath. Bath. Peggy is bathing Billy when the bathwater starts to boil. Literally boiling, with bubbles rising from below, steam billowing up. The tap is off. There's no heat source. Peggy pulls Billy out of the water just in time. The boy's skin is red, almost burned. Living room, Johnny is watching television when the set explodes. It's no ordinary malfunction. The screen bursts out with such force that shards of glass embed themselves in the opposite wall. Johnny is covered in small, superficial cuts. When investigators examine the remains of the television, they find it is completely charred inside, as if it had been struck by lightning, even though there was no storm. Kitchen, Playfair finds Peggy standing motionless, staring at the refrigerator. When he asks what's wrong, she points silently. There's a message written on the refrigerator door, formed with magnetic letters the children use. It reads, "Janet dies soon. Christmas is coming, but there is no joy at 284 Green Street." Janet is in her bed when the most violent possession to date begins. Her body arches backward with such force that it seems her spine will snap. Her eyes roll back, revealing only the whites. Her mouth opens impossibly wide, and from it emerges not one voice, but multiple voices speaking at once, a cacophony of male, female, young, and old sounds, whispers and screams mingled in a diabolical chorus. Grosse is recording, but his hands are shaking so much that he can barely hold the equipment. The voices speak in English, then switch to something else. Playfair, who speaks several languages, recognizes fragments of Latin, words in dead languages that a public school girl from Enfield shouldn't know. The objects in the room begin to levitate simultaneously. Books, clothes, toys, everything floating in the air, orbiting around Janet as if she were the center of an invisible whirlwind. Margaret is hysterical, screaming her sister's name over and over again. Peggy tries to approach Janet, but an invisible force pushes her back so violently that she hits the wall and falls to the ground. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stops. Objects fall. Janet collapses. Voices fall silent. The room falls into a deathly silence. Janet is unconscious, barely breathing, her pulse weak and erratic. Grosse calls an ambulance. The doctors examine Janet thoroughly. They run blood tests, X-rays, and electroencephalograms. They look for neurological explanations, signs of epilepsy, brain tumors, anything that might explain her symptoms. They find nothing. Physically, Janet is healthy. There is nothing medically wrong with her. A psychiatrist is called in. He talks to Janet, asking questions about her home life, her parents' divorce, and her emotional state. "Do you ever feel like you need attention?" the doctor asks. "Do you sometimes do things to get people's attention?" Janet looks at him with tired eyes, too tired for an 11-year-old girl. "Do you think I'm faking it?" he asks in a flat voice. "I'm trying to understand what's going on." "Me too," Janet says. "I want to understand too. But I can't. Because when it happens, I'm not there. I'm somewhere dark, and there are things there, things that touch me and whisper to me and promise me terrible things." The psychiatrist writes in his notebook. His eventual diagnosis: possible dissociative disorder secondary to family stress. Seek help. I recommend family therapy. Peggy reads the report and crumples it angrily. "They don't understand anything," he tells Grosse. "They think my daughter is making all this up for attention. As if we could fake the banging that the whole street hears. As if we could fake the photographs. As if we could make up that the police were witnesses." Grosse puts a hand on his shoulder. "I know it's real," she says. "I believe in you." Paranormal activity reaches a terrifying crescendo. Now it's not just Janet who is affected. The whole family is experiencing phenomena. Billy is pushed down the stairs by invisible hands. He suffers a broken wrist. Margaret wakes up one night with her hair tangled in hundreds of tight knots, impossible to untangle. They have to cut it. Johnny begins having violent nightmares. He describes dreams where dark men enter his room and stand around his bed, watching him, waiting. Peggy finds her clothes torn, her belongings broken, and threatening messages scrawled on the walls with charcoal. The house itself seems to be dying. The plants in the windows wilt and die for no reason. The paint is peeling off in large chunks. There's a persistent smell of decay that no amount of cleaning can eliminate. Grosse decides to try to communicate directly with the entities. He sets up a formal session, with recorders, cameras, and all the measuring instruments he owns. He invites other researchers from the Society for Psychic Research to act as witnesses. He sits in the room, with Janet in her bed, and talks into the air. If there is anyone here, if there is something you want to communicate, I ask that you speak up. We have no hostile intentions. We only want to understand. Silence. Then the blows begin. Soft at first, then getting stronger and stronger. Can you answer questions? 1 tap for yes, 2 taps for no. A resounding blow. Grosse asks a series of questions. The answers come in the form of knocks. Yes. No. Sometimes 3 or 4 knocks that don't fit the agreed-upon pattern, as if the entity were frustrated with the limitation. Are you Bill Wilkins? 2 knocks. No. Grosse is surprised. For months, the voice has insisted it was Bill Wilkins. Who are you then? The voice comes from Janet, but it's different this time. Deeper than Bill's voice. Older. It has a timbre that makes the hairs on the back of Grosse's neck stand on end. I have no name. Names are for things that live and die. I never lived. I have always been. What are you? I am hunger. I am emptiness. I am what waits in the places between places. Why are you here? What do you want? The voice laughs, and the sound is like breaking glass. I want to enter. I want to feel. I want to live. And this girl is my door. What follows is something that none of those present will ever forget. The whole house begins to shake. It's not an earthquake, there's no seismic record. But the walls tremble, the floor ripples like water, the furniture jumps and shakes. All the lights in the house begin to flicker in sequence, creating a nauseating strobe. And the figures appear. It is not a single apparition, but multiple ones. Human-shaped shadows materialize in the hallways, in the corners, in doorways. They are not solid, but they are undeniably there, darknesses denser than the surrounding darkness, with hints of faces, of outstretched hands. One of them walks toward Grosse. He can feel the cold emanating from her, a chill that penetrates to his bones. The figure stops inches from him, and although she has no visible eyes, Grosse can feel that she is watching him, studying him, judging him. Upstairs, Janet levitates again, but this time her body is rigid, upright, rising slowly until her head almost touches the ceiling. Her eyes are open but empty. Her mouth moves, but no sound comes out. The dark figures begin to climb the stairs, a silent procession of shadows, all converging towards the girl's room. Playfair tries to stop them, to get in their way, but they pass right through him. He later describes the sensation as being submerged in ice, feeling like every cell in my body was freezing and dying. Shadows surround Janet, forming a circle around her floating body. And then the sound begins. It is a song, if it can be called that. Inhuman voices in a discordant harmony, singing words in a language that does not exist, that never existed, that should not be heard by human ears. The window panes begin to crack. Blood begins to flow from the noses of everyone present. Margaret is screaming, but the sound is drowned out by the singing that grows in volume, louder and louder, more insistent. Peggy pushes her way through the shadows, ignoring the pain, the cold, the sheer terror, and grabs her daughter. She pulls Janet down, breaking whatever is holding her up. Janet falls into his arms, unconscious, cold as death. And everything stops. The shadows disappear. The singing stops. The lights stabilize. The silence that follows is absolute, oppressive, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Nobody slept the rest of that night. They sit in the living room, wrapped in blankets, drinking tea they cannot taste, staring blankly into space. Janet is curled up next to her mother, awake but not speaking, just staring into space. Grosse checks his equipment. Several cameras have stopped working. The recorders picked up the singing, but the audio quality is so distorted that it's barely audible, as if something had deliberately interfered with the recordings. But there is a photo. A single clear photo, taken at the height of the demonstration. It shows Janet suspended in midair, surrounded by dark shapes. And in those shapes, if you look closely, if you really look, you can see hints of faces. Not human faces. Something older, more primal. Faces that never had flesh, never had life, but that still stare out from the photograph with a hungry, malevolent intelligence. Grosse holds the photo with trembling hands. What do we do now? Playfair asks. There is no answer to that question. They are calling for priests. Not just Anglicans, but Catholics, even a rabbi who lives in the area. Each one comes, performs their rites, their blessings, their exorcisms. Nothing changes. The Catholic priest, a 70-year-old man with decades of experience in spiritual cases, leaves the house trembling, his face pale. This is beyond my capacity, he admits. There are things in there that I don't recognize, that aren't in any text I've studied. This isn't simply a trapped human spirit. It's something much darker. He refuses to return. Months pass. The activity continues, though with less intensity than that terrible night. It's as if the entities have reached some kind of limit, as if they've tried something and failed. But they haven't left. The knocking continues. Objects still move. The voice of Bill Wilkins still speaks through Janet, though less frequently now. Janet is adapting to her situation in a way that is almost more disturbing than the manifestations themselves. She has learned to recognize when a possession is coming. She feels a chill in her stomach, a ringing in her ears. Sometimes I can fight it, she tells Grosse. I can stay inside my head, watch what he does to my body, hear what he says in my voice. It's horrible. It's like being buried alive but still being able to see and hear everything. The Enfield case has become an international sensation. Newspapers around the world are reporting on the haunted house in Enfield. Television programs are covering the story. Curious tourists are showing up on Green Street, trying to catch a glimpse of the house, disturbing the family. But with fame comes skepticism. Professional magicians and skeptics alike come forward, claiming they can explain all the phenomena. They say Janet is a gifted child who has fooled gullible researchers. They point out that some of the phenomena occurred when no one was directly watching, suggesting trickery and deception. An illusionist named Milburn Christopher published a lengthy article debunking the case. He never visited the house, never interviewed the family, and based his conclusions entirely on second-hand reports. It's a classic case of mass hysteria combined with a smart, attention-seeking girl, she writes confidently. Grosse is furious. He spent months in that house, witnessed things that defy all rational explanation, and now people who were never there are accusing him of being a gullible fool. But the most damaging criticism comes from within. Anita Gregory, a researcher with the Society for Psychical Research, visited the house and claimed to have caught Janet faking some phenomena. She said she saw the girl bending spoons with her hands and making noises by banging things when she thought no one was watching. Grosse doesn't deny that Janet has occasionally faked some minor events. The girl has openly admitted it. She's bored, scared, and has been under constant observation for months. Sometimes she simulates phenomena because she hopes that if she pretends long enough, people will leave and the real things will stop too. But faking a bent spoon doesn't explain the photographed levitations. It doesn't explain the recorded voices. It doesn't explain the hundreds of witnesses who have directly experienced these phenomena. However, the damage is done. The Enfield case, once taken seriously by the parapsychological community, is now viewed with suspicion. It's been almost a year since it started. The phenomena are finally decreasing. The knocks are less frequent. The voice of Bill Wilkins appears only occasionally. Objects no longer fly. Janet no longer levitates. It's as if the entities are getting tired, or losing interest, or perhaps simply withdrawing temporarily. One night, the voice speaks for the last time. "I'm leaving now," he says through Janet, but with the genuinely sad tone of old Bill Wilkins, not the malevolence of the other entities. "I've been used for a long time. They used me to scare, to open doors. But it didn't work. The girl is stronger than they thought. Their love protected her." "Who?" Grosse asks one last time. "Who used you?" "Those who wait. Those who have always waited. Those who want to enter this world but need an invitation, need open doors from this side. They tried to use the girl as a door. They failed. For now. For now. They are always waiting. They will always be waiting. In dark places, in weak moments, in houses where pain and fear have thinned the walls between worlds." And then, more gently, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I scared the children. I didn't mean to. But I couldn't help it. I was trapped, and they were controlling me. Can you leave now? Can you find peace?" There is a long pause. "I don't know. I don't know where to go. I've been trapped for so long. But maybe now that they've let me go, maybe I can find my way." The voice fades away. Janet sighs deeply, as if she had been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. "She's gone," she whispers. "She's really gone. I can feel it." The house is quiet for the first time in over a year. There are no knocks. There are no voices. There are no objects moving. The family begins, slowly and cautiously, to return to something resembling normality. Janet is going back to school. She has missed more than a year of education, but she is determined to catch up. Margaret starts sleeping in her own bed again, instead of crammed in with her brothers in the living room. Johnny and Billy start playing outside again, something they hadn't done in months. Peggy cries with relief. She has aged years in these months. Her hair shows gray streaks that weren't there before. But her children are safe. That's all that matters. Grosse and Playfair pack up their equipment. They have recorded over 1,000 hours of audio, taken hundreds of photographs, and meticulously documented every event for 18 months. "What will you do with all this?" Peggy asks. "I'll write a book," Grosse says. "I'll tell your story. People need to know that these things are real, that there's more to the world than we can see or understand." "Will they believe you?" Grosse smiles sadly. "Some did. Many didn't. But it doesn't matter. I know what I saw. You know what you went through. That's enough." The years go by. The Hodgson family eventually moved out of the house on Green Street. Not out of fear of ongoing phenomena, but simply because the house held too many painful memories. New families live there. Some report strange experiences, footsteps upstairs when no one is there, shadows moving in their peripheral vision, a general feeling of unease. But nothing that comes close to the intensity of 1977 to 1978. It's as if the entities had exhausted their energy, or as if the window that briefly opened had closed. Janet grows up, becomes an adult. She marries, has children. She lives a normal life. But she carries the scars of those 18 months. She has occasional nightmares. There are times when she feels the familiar chill in her stomach, the ringing in her ears, and fears it's returning. But he never returns. Janet, now a middle-aged woman, is sitting in her living room, talking to an interviewer. "People always want to know if it was real," she says. "Especially now, with movies and TV shows about the case. They ask me if we faked the whole thing, if it was just a girl looking for attention." He stops, looks out the window at a sun-drenched garden, so different from that dark house on Green Street. "I can't make people believe me. I know it sounds impossible. I know it defies logic. But it happened. Every terrifying thing, every moment of absolute terror, was real. And it scarred my family forever. The skeptics say. The skeptics weren't there, Janet interrupts, firmly but without anger. They didn't feel the invisible hands grabbing them. They didn't hear the voices coming from their own throats. They didn't see their mother weep night after night because she couldn't protect her children from something she couldn't see or understand. Did you ever find out what they were? What they wanted? Janet considers the question. Maurice Grosse had a theory. He said there was a convergence of things, my age, right in puberty, a time of change and energy. The emotional pain in the house after my parents' divorce. And something else, something I had been waiting for, watching, looking for a crack to get into. Ghosts? Not just ghosts. Ghosts can be part of it. Bill Wilkins, if it really was him, was used by something bigger, something darker. Something that was never human and wants to experience what it is to be alive, to feel, to exist in this world. He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. There are thin spots, I think. Places where the barriers between our world and other places are more fragile. And there are times when those barriers weaken even further. Our house, at that time, with everything that was going on, became one of those thin spots. And something tried to break through. Why did it stop? Janet smiles, but it's a sad smile. I'm not sure they've stopped. I think they failed at what they were trying to do. My mother saved me. Her love, her refusal to give up or run away, somehow kept me grounded in this world when they were trying to drag me into theirs. But I don't think they're gone forever. I think they're waiting. Always waiting. The house at 284 Green Street is dark. A family sleeps on the upper floor. Parents and children, unaware of the history that resides within these walls. In the silence of 3:47 in the morning, there is a sound. One single tap. Soft. Almost imperceptible. Then nothing. For now. The Enfield case remains one of the most documented and controversial poltergeist cases in modern history. Maurice Grosse spent the rest of his life defending its authenticity, convinced until his death in 2006 that he had witnessed something genuinely paranormal. Guy Lyon Playfair published a comprehensive book about the case, This House is Haunted, detailing every event, every testimony, every piece of evidence collected during those intense 18 months. Skeptics continue to argue that it was an elaborate hoax, that a clever girl deceived gullible researchers. They point to the times Janet was caught faking minor events. They say all the evidence can be explained by trickery, illusion, and human error. Believers point to the hundreds of witnesses, the inexplicable photographs, the audio recordings of voices that shouldn't exist, the police officers, journalists, and neighbors who saw things they cannot explain. The truth, as always in cases like this, remains elusive. What really happened at 284 Green Street during those dark months of 1977 and 1978? Was it a genuine paranormal phenomenon, an open window to dimensions that are normally closed to us? Or was it a combination of mass hysteria, childish delusion, and researchers too willing to believe? Each person must decide for themselves. But if you find yourself in Enfield, walking down Green Street on a dark night, and you pass that red brick house that looks like all the others, perhaps you'll feel something. A chill that shouldn't be there. A feeling of being watched. A whisper at the edge of hearing. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear a knock. Gentle. Deliberate. Expecting. Always waiting.